Good morning. Happy Wednesday, LinkedIn. Welcome to another episode of Let's Build HubSpot Websites with Anton. How you doing this week, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. Uh,
What?
I'm so happy to have this show with you now. Like, this is one of those topics, and just website functionality in HubSpot in general
Mhm.
is so underrated. It's so undervalued, especially the topic that we're going to talk about today. So I can't get enough. And I know until people talk about it more, like uh, people are not aware of the power here.
Yeah,
And, to put it simply, it's not easy to get buy-in or people to understand the value of whatever website you go to, seeing related this, or you might like this, or all these like B2C experiences that we're used to.
Mhm.
And man, if you got HubSpot, it's way easier than most people think,
Definitely.
to do that. So we're going to talk about some of the different ways you can do that. But first, like, why do you think it's maybe taken so long for people to really understand that they can do this? It's not about should you do this. Usually people understand why it's a good idea. But what are the things that maybe get in the way of them actually doing it?
Good question. I would say it's maybe because they are not aware of, hey, we can personalize. This is one idea that I have. And the second idea would be that they want to start, right? If you're talking about websites and starting rebuilding something, there's this approach that is called growth driven design, right? So many people in the HubSpot ecosystem are familiar with that. So the first step is start, right? Start small and then evolve to something. And therefore, many people, I would assume so, just want to start easy because personalization and evolution of the whole website is a process. And they just want to start. And once they've started, there's so many other things. Like, we want to have blogs, we want to write emails, we want to do that, this, that, whatsoever. So this is why I would say personalization and building personalized web experiences is quite often on the lower tier of to dos. So this is why many of the companies, people, HubSpot users, whatever you want to call it, don't get to the point to personalize things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like the mention of awareness, and also the point at which they're usually making decisions, around this stuff is like because of the old ways, we'll call them. Like when we're determining what is easy and what is quick as we first start building website, personalization is usually like, far away, because we think about the maintenance and okay, if we want to personalize for 1,000 customers, that means we need 1,000 different pages. And maybe we did that over here before. We heard of this other software that did it, but it costs a lot of money, or like there was a whole team, supporting that. So it's the last thing we want to think about, as we're first starting. But then also you mentioned before we went on, there's these migrations. And this is one of those places where I always try to say, like, migrating to HubSpot is not like, you know, I know it doesn't sound easy. Like you can't just export from wherever and import into HubSpot, right? And it's not even that easy to
That is
copy paste, right? But it's because you shouldn't do that, right? If you're going to take advantage of HubSpot CMS, like the design and like how you can put your pages together really should change. And then you get to the point where it's like, oh, instead of having to recreate these 1,000 pages, I'm creating one template and then supporting it through like, dynamic records or HubDB, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's where if we can help maybe open up, the mind a little bit, what we're describing, personalization, no matter at what scale, is difficult when you don't have a system set up, to personalize. Um, and that's not what we're here. We're here to say, like, why is it possible? Why is it cheaper than you think it is? Why is it easier to set up, easier to maintain? That's the value. Like that's the underpowered, or that's the underrated, mechanism at play here. That if you could just try this a couple times, like all the way down to smart content modules, right?
Hmm.
Like once I can help people understand that all you have to do is maintain the CRM,
Yeah.
which again, maybe that's a different conversation about those challenges, maintaining your CRM data. If you can do that, now the website's just taking care of itself, right? Um, that's really the only way personalization at scale like works anymore, or else you do need big teams that are always in pages. But the fact is, you don't have to be, right? So kind of as you talk to people, like,
Yeah.
does that kind of resonate with them? Are those the same things you're talking about when you try to get them to understand?
I would say so, and also you've mentioned a very important thing, like people not that or are not aware of the functionality or options that are available in HubSpot. So if you're building or if you have to rebuild a lot of pages, so for instance, you have, let's say, 20, 30 products, and every product has your own page. Sure, you can go and create a template and then start creating every page manually. This is possible, but and I would say it's somewhat maintainable if it's 10, 20, 30 pages. Somewhat maintainable, right? But you could use HubDB. This is a feature in HubSpot. And you could technically build one template, and every row in HubDB would be a single page. This means you can optimize your workflow to the point that you are working in, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV, something like that. And every line is one page. So, for instance, you could update or create a bunch of pages with ease, right? And it's a super powerful feature.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples handy, or should I show some?
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with HubDB before, so a pretty simple example that I've built for the very first developer hug was a real estate listing page. So you had mm, like real estate A, B, C with some sort of informations about this real estate. And you had also a discover more button, for instance, right? And once you've clicked on that, a page about this specific real estate was generated and provided a lot more informations. So, for instance, what I've put inside there was something like an automatically generated um, Google map, which took the geographical data from HubDB, like longitude and those coordinates, and put them inside Google Maps map, which was interactive and provided a lot more informations. And we, I've also implemented a form per page. So crazy setup, and it was super simple to set up, right? And the other thing that I remember is in the days when I was working in a partner agency, mm, there was a client request, and this client wanted to have his whole product database inside HubSpot, right? And we were talking about thousands of products. Like, I don't remember, but I think somewhere between 7 and 10,000 products per language. And there were a few other um, things. And the first idea was, hey, okay, let's build or let's use HubDB to display all the products and create a dedicated page for each product. And after a while, we discovered a better fitting function in HubSpot, which was custom objects. Uh, but basically, HubDB and custom objects can or share a lot of similarities. So therefore, almost everything that is possible in HubDB is also possible in custom objects and vice versa. HubDB has a few benefits. HubDB has a few benefits. So it always depends on what you're trying to achieve or what you want to achieve. But basically, you could utilize both features to create CRM powered or, yeah, like CRM powered websites, website experiences, and yeah.
So like what are some of your favorite use cases? Like and maybe let's if we can, because if you do go into a page and you look at the settings, you can see, without even getting to the HubDB, you can see there's smart content, options in some of the modules. And then in the settings of a page, you see, private content and dynamic, source data, right? So if you could take us through maybe from smart content up, like, because I think like that's where there is some complexity that you want to understand. Databases is the right word, right? We have CRM records, sometimes custom objects that are serving as a database of information. But then we can also use HubDB as a database, uh, kind of built for website visuals, right? So it's easier to add images and things like that. Maybe a little more intuitive, although they're getting a lot better on the CRM records with some of that stuff and the way it interacts with dynamic pages. But then also as simple as lists, right?
Mm-hmm.
The original database, if you will, of how we're managing information,
Yeah.
which is what drives, can drive, often drives the smart content, management, where it's just, hey, this thing on a page, if you're from SaaS, we want you to see this. If you're from manufacturing, we want you to see this, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of
I
your
mean,
favorite use cases that you've either seen or developed yourself?
mm, I mean, things. Or I personally see HubDB as a database, as you've mentioned. So I find myself quite often in the space that I use HubDB as some sort of, let's say, an extended version of global modules. So even with this personalization that you've mentioned or smart content, I mean, let's imagine a slider element. Very simple, just a few logos, right? And for the German audience, let's say you have a smart list with, hey, those are people from Germany, and you have a list for US people, right? So, super simple list. Just to talk about an example. And you would like to display different logos to each of the lists, right? So, you would set up smart content, and what you can do is you can, if the module has this functionality, add as many logos as you want to, right? But this has the drawback that you would need to re-add the logos every time you use this module or smart rule, unless it's a global module. And from my experience, it's way easier to, let's say, create a HubDB with 2 rows or three, how many you want to add. It's limited to 10,000s for people that are not aware of that. So you could technically add up to 10,000 lines. And line A would be German logos, line B would be US logos, right? And then in the module, while you are setting up the smart rules, you would just have a drop down with, do you want to show the German logos or the English logos, right? So this could also be used for just boosting the performance in terms of, hey, how much time do I need to spend to create the smart rule, right? Because with HubDB, it's more or less like set and forget because it's a database, right? It will store the information until you decide to delete it. And you can extend it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
simple example.
Yeah. And that's where I think I'm just going to share my screen real quick to show an example of a couple different things. That's like a part of the complexity. And that's why always understanding what your goals are is step one. Like, what do you want the experience to be on your page and for who? Right. So, one of the first times I took advantage of this as we were building out some more international facing websites. And, this is where just simply like so many people want this ability to just hit one contact button and then get the right contact information from wherever the person is at, like in these regional situations, like you mentioned. And that's where you start to look at, smart rules, which is a part of most modules, that you'll see. And here we have, add source, contact this membership. So I was just talking about this membership.
Yeah.
For me, that's been the easiest way, but there's also the specific, the first way I just talked about is based on country IP, address, right? Preferred language, all these different ways that we can, show different content or create a different experience, on our page. And it might be showing a different image. Like I always try to relate it to these things that we think are just, just so crazy technological, like the way that Netflix can show you, a different thumbnail of a show, if just to see if you'll click on this thumbnail instead of the other thumbnail, right? It's
Yeah.
it's cool, and they definitely started, and we're probably way ahead of the game in terms of media displaying that way. But we can do stuff like that, in using a tool like HubSpot, based on when they visited, based on IP addresses, you know, based on all the things we want to know for other reasons,
Yeah.
right? Well, we can just plug that in right here,
Yeah.
and make use of it. Then, like Anton said, you make use of the HubDB as well, which is this database that talks about, okay, here's what I want to happen, when that thing is true. And maybe it's not as simple as one variable, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I want, like, once we know it's German, we got to do this and this and this, right, on the page, right? So instead of, that's where it's easy to talk about like page creation, right? But the ability to manage just the information as granular as you
Mhm.
want, like on a page versus the whole page, right, is kind of anywhere in between is where you're able to go, right?
Yeah.
So just showing these examples. This is a HubDB, that supports this this module that's showing, clips or episodes of the show, right? And then we have various options
Mhm.
over here, like I could make it show a lot more if I want, all the stuff that you're used to if you're in here. But this is when we get to the idea of no code and why you can do these amazing things without needing to code to maintain it, right? This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. And once you strategically decide what you want,
Mhm.
it's about, okay, what information or what system tools should we be using to support that activity in a way that's not so cumbersome to stop us from maintaining it, to stop us from taking advantage of the opportunity, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is a great point, um, because I found myself quite often in the situation where I had to build or maintain websites, and it was very cluttered from the past, I would say. So it was quite hard for me to, or for the people I've worked with, to edit simple pages, right? And with HubDB, it's easy, right? And also, in terms of personalization, you could um, use, or you could create a module that would have a drop down for show row A or show row B. This is possible. But if you want to have something completely different, then what you also can do is create a module and say use table A or table B, which might have different layouts, informations, and so on. And there are a lot of features that you have to think about, and something that I tell almost everybody that I'm talking to who's a developer is be creative in your solution, right? So, for instance, in the real estate example that I've mentioned earlier, I've used the rich text field, the most basic rich text field, to create a slider, like an image slider. But I did not pass code into it. I just passed image URLs into one big rich text, and Yeah, and HubSpot, Hubble, HubDB, just the alignment of those features, with the alignment of those features and the usage of those features, I could create a image slider in, let's say, under 5 minutes, which was always different on every page, right? And this is amazing, right? And yeah,
Yeah. No, these experiences, that's where it's literally like decide what you want first and
yeah,
why you want it. And then let's talk about it. And I think the
yeah,
creative, this is where you can get bogged down in a conversation of like what's actually possible in HubSpot. And
hmm,
if you're having that conversation with somebody who's not 100% aware, you start to like, I guess what I want to say is try to avoid the situation where like, yeah, well, it's not a blank slate like WordPress is or any of these other platforms. Like, no, it's not. And there's lots of good reasons for that, but we're not going to go into that, right? That
no,
doesn't mean you can't do whatever you want to do, right? It usually will get to the point of like, if you can't do it, then your goal is a great customer experience, and you for some reason cannot do it in HubSpot, which I think is few and far between at this point. Like you probably shouldn't do it because it's not going to be a good, great, it's not going to be a great experience, right?
yeah,
That's why the guardrails are there, right? Both
hmm,
from a external experience perspective, but also internal. Like, why would don't create 1,000 pages? Like, you can't maintain that. Like, don't put that burden on your team, no matter how bad the leader of this group wants that thing. Right. So when we talk about being creative, it's like, okay, this is the infrastructure we have outside of CMS. How can that support, what we're doing inside in a way that's always keeping in mind, like we need to be able to maintain this long term without being attached to one person who holds all the keys to the code. Right. So
exactly.
many people we talk to, that's the situation they're in. And that just, stops so much experience innovation because of this old way of, oh,
Hmm,
it sucks when I gotta call this guy every time, right? Or this group of
yeah,
people every time. Like, I'm done with it. I'm not interested. So let's just put up a catalog website that's not personalized, not customized, because that'll be easier, right?
yeah,
But then what happens? One of my favorite use cases, and this is also a trick if you want to get sales to be better at CRM. If you've seen the amount of work they put into personalizing slide decks, right? We can actually save time there. And I love the eureka moment when some of them realize we can use landing pages and website pages in HubSpot as if it's a slide deck. And then you just, based on the customer you're talking to, like their logo is going to show up and you just present the website just like you would a slide deck. Way less work. By the way, marketing gets to control messaging a little bit better, than just having each salesperson, create their own slide deck and manage their own deck, which don't get me wrong, they do because they usually don't have the tools around them
yeah,
and they know how important personalization is. So it's like, uh, hack there. If you want sales to put better data in the CRM and then you show them this is how easy this personalization at scale could be for you, those are the kinds of things that will help them use the system, right?
great point, great point. And something I could think of is also they don't think that way, right? Because for years and years and I don't know how many years, everybody knows the whole Office suite. So PowerPoint, Excel, Word, or the corresponding tools from Google or other manufacturers in this case, and nobody thinks of, hey, we can do a bit or work a bit different. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's some powerful stuff. And that's where if you've got HubSpot and you've got access to some of these tools already, which you do at least have like free, and you can start to check it out, and like even stuff like payment links, all these web experiences that we think that we need other whole platforms for. You just don't. And if you can do it in HubSpot, all the magic of all this is it's right next to the smart CRM. Personalizing at scale requires customer data, like period. Right.
Yeah.
And the farther away it is from the thing that you want to personalize, the harder it's going to be, the more mistakes, that are made, the more misinformation that gets shared. And this is the kind of thing that if you hear a sales guy say something like, I want this process to be better for me, or I want you to do the slides for me, marketing person, or how can we make this look better? Let's look into presentation software. Like, it's just like, wait a second. If that's where we're going, let's see what we can do, in our HubSpot portal. And it might be right there, for us. So, hopefully this was helpful. We're just scratching the surface here too. Like, I mean, there's some great webinars out there. And Remotish did one a couple years ago about just straight up HubDB, use cases, from job listing pages to related products all over the site. All these things that we're used to feeling when we go to really good B2C websites, we could have it. Like it's right there for B2B, much cheaper than you think. And I know awesome developers like Anton can turn that stuff around if you're ready. If you're ready with strategy and understanding, it's not just go, hey guy, you don't need to see any of the data in our portal, right? But this is what we want. We want these personalized experiences. Like, no, not that easy, right? We still need to understand the data model and, how the whole system works together, right? So that the internal team knows if I don't put a shipping date right here, it's not going to be on the website like we want it to be for the customer, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully we open some eyes, open some minds, what's possible here. I'm sure we'll, keep coming around this topic. It's hard not to talk about these things when you're talking about HubSpot websites. And reach out if you guys got questions. Until then, think about that personalized web experience. What was the last thing you were like, man, I wish that would be cool if we could do that on our website? Find those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great one.